Anyone with any connection to the arts right now experiences a lot of pushback against AI-generated imagery. There are a lot of things to discuss in regard to AI. If you clicked on this video, most likely you already have a lot of thoughts about it in regard to ethics, society, culture, lots of other important things like that. Yesterday I generated, just on a whim, an AI image. I didn't need it for anything. I just watched a video that mentioned how a lot of AI is creepy and weird. I was messing around, so I asked Adobe Photoshop to use AI to generate the interior of a restaurant. This is what it came up with. I'm putting aside everything I might have to say about culture and ethics and things like that. Instead of any of that, I just want to talk about the technique involved here. I'm going to critique this work as if it were produced by one of my design students. First, let's just give it an initial reaction. For that, I'm going to zoom way out. It certainly does look like the interior of a diner or restaurant. My perception of AI here is that it produces casual sketches and then it relies on some tricks to quickly make the sketches look polished and sort of fill things in. When I first examined this image, my thoughts went immediately to some advice that I often give when I'm mentoring scene painters. It's crucial when you begin painting that you know what it is that you are mimicking. Even if you're just painting with an illustrative style, you still need to know at any given moment exactly what it is that you are painting. For example, if you decide to paint a floor, let's say you want a blue and white texture, you'll end up with a floor that looks like a painted blue and white texture. It might match the costumes as intended. It might serve the needs of the lighting designer. It doesn't necessarily really add anything to the story being told, though, and it might even hurt the story because the absence of intention draws attention to things. We become aware of the painter's work because when we look at the floor, that's the only story being told by that texture. Now consider if instead the painter or designer specified a material. We can easily stick with the same color palette. If you want the floor to be blue and white, fine. It could be marble, it could be a stylized type of stone. Even within those, I strongly advise taking aim at something very specific. There's lots of different kinds of marble in the world. There's all kinds of granite, there's other interesting stones. You can adapt the colors any way you want. Stone comes in all shapes and sizes and textures. It could be cut stone, flagstone, river stone, field stone, all sorts of stuff. Let's say that we're just going to do, rounded field stone in this instance. Now, even at this stage, beginning painters often need a little bit of guidance. Now, here's a step-by-step guide I made for a production of Cinderella back in 2003. Now, I knew I was going to be very far away when the painting was happening, so I took the time to create this before I left. Cartoon stone was right on target for the design style, though we still wanted an illustrative quality with shading and sculpting. Now, here's where the beginners sometimes lose their way. As they get to painting the outlines of the stones, they start to abbreviate too much. The technique becomes all about claiming territory rather than about outlining stones. Each individual stone must receive attention, if only for a moment. Each stone needs to be given a distinct shape and outline all its own. Ultimately, they need to fit together in a certain way. If you don't give each stone its own shape, then you end up with what I call fish scales. Now, this same type of thinking is true when you're doing set renderings and models. For the past 30 years or so, I've been working almost exclusively with digital 3D models, but for the sake of this video, I want to talk about drawing and sketching. Now, fortunately, I've been doing design work even way back before then, so I've got some old hand-rendered work I can share. This is a rendering I did for The Imaginary Invalid by Molière. We produced this at The Ohio State University in 1994. Now, at this time, it had been a very popular trend to transpose classical plays. Any Shakespeare or other classic was almost automatically moved in space and time so that it was a black and white movie, film noir, an MTV video, or a rock opera. The director for this show kind of rebelled against this movement with satire, so he set this in a parallel universe where the French Revolution had never happened. It was happening in present time, 1994, in the state of Ohio. Because the French Revolution never happened, neither did the Louisiana Purchase. Ohio was still a part of the French Empire under His Majesty King Louis XXIV. We call the design and architectural style techno-baroque. Now, I can go on about that for a while, but I need to talk about this rendering right now. If you zoom in, you can see that everything in this rendering is a little scribbly. This was done with a combination of colored pencils and acetone markers and dry pastels. I adopted those as my go-to back in the day because I could make pictures with them really quickly. The placement of the objects in this set rendering were done with mechanical perspective drawing methods. Once upon a time, each chair and wall section was sketched in. From there, the details got added. There's always this balancing act between how much detail to aim for versus how much time to spend. Now in this rendering, I'm indicating how things will look when the set is built. It's not as detailed as a photograph at all. It provides enough direction though so that everyone involved can make decisions or ask good questions. Some things in this rendering are a little ambiguous. This cabinet up here has a lever attached. It evolved a bit in its final incarnation. These doors have futuristic variations of wainscoting that merge classical Baroque with Buck Rogers. You can see little gold cupids up here, each one posing with a lighting fixture in its arms. The important thing here is that as you zoom in on any specific thing, you can sort out what it is that you're looking at. The platforms appear to be perhaps an inch thick or so, with flat black facings set back a bit. This furniture looks a little messy, but it's fairly contemporary 90s office furniture with extra gold trim added on. We can see a skyline of illustrated glass and steel skyscrapers outside with some sort of smaller tenement buildings in the foreground. This set of shelves over here, upstage right, had glassware on it with lots of colored liquids. It looks a bit like a chemistry set. People who know the play know that Mazur Agom is a hypochondriac who consumed tons of medicines of various kinds throughout the play. Essentially, this rendering is a quick sketch in color with details filled in to a limited depth. Even though it does not answer every possible question, it provides a decent understanding that a director and creative team can use to move forward. Now I'm going to show you a drawing for a similar show. This one is for The Liar by Pierre Corneille. This was a preliminary drawing for a project that was never built. It's got no color, just grayscale markers, black pen. You'll notice that this is much more scribbly than that rendering for Imaginary Invalid. The tops of these arches are not clearly defined. They suggest that there are some sort of sculptural elements on top. This could be either a finial or a small statue. These balustrades have posts that are not clearly defined. However, we can tell what's going on here. They're freestanding columns joined by arches. Some of them support a balcony and a set of open stairs. At a glance, we can assume that this set would probably require welding and steelwork in order to be safe to climb. Both the director and the lighting designer can formulate clear questions, and they can begin making choices. This method of oversimplifying something while still communicating is sometimes called abbreviation. The flagstones on the deck here are an excellent example of abbreviation. If this set were actually built, it's likely that these outlines on these flagstones would fill the set, at least all the way up to these curved steps. It's important to note that even these abbreviated lines follow the rules of topography and perspective. If they were distorted in any way, we would see that as evidence that the floor is curved or sloped in some way, or in some other way unusual. Now in art, we're used to seeing details being abbreviated. There's standards and norms for how abbreviation is done. These norms vary a bit among different media and different styles, but in essence, these shortcuts are part of a visual language that we all understand. As an artist or designer, even though you are abbreviating, it's crucial that you know what it is you are abbreviating. This sketch includes a cutout background of Renaissance buildings and canals. You can see windows with shutters on this building. The windows are represented using minimal effort, but the strokes used are placed in a manner that's consistent with what's being represented. Now let's go back to that AI-generated image. I'm going to treat it as a sketch, and let's unpack what's going on here. First of all, at a glance, it certainly does look like a restaurant, at least for a moment. There's a big difference between what this AI did here and what a design generates. That difference is called intention. Now, in a proper set design, every element represented in the rendering includes sort of a promise, or at least a recommendation about what should be or will be included physically on the stage. This creates a mindset in which the composition itself is actually composed of clearly defined, hypothetical, planned physical elements. Let's explore this image and see how it holds up as a potential set design rendering. Let's start in the bottom left corner over here. There's two tables here with a booth seat. The booth wraps around this table here. The seat gets a little messy right here, but I think I understand it. The back is oddly reclined. It doesn't look very comfortable. There's some extra structure of some kind visible among the legs here. Looks like there might be curtains or something hanging here for some reason. I'm not sure if or how this bench seat interacts with the other table here. Now let's pan up. These planters are interesting. First of all, this is a terrible place to put a big plant. Someone will be sitting here. They don't need their heads surrounded by leaves and branches. There's not room for a plant on this ledge anyway, though this looks more like a flat piece of wood with a plant somehow sticking out of the top of it. Immediate questions from a director would be, is this plant going to be in the way of the actors? Why is the planter flat like this, and could we do something else with it, like moving it up stage or maybe make it a hanging plant? Oddly, the other planter shown here does not match this one. This makes it hard to understand what the intention is. Now let's pan up higher. I'm not sure what the relationship is between the window and frames here, but that might not be a big worry. I'm much more interested in knowing what's going on all along this cornice area. There's abstract shapes that are glowing. This one in particular is concerning. It looks like something either out of the original War of the Worlds film from 1953 or maybe from the Jetsons. Now, there's nothing wrong with that style, but why is it growing organically out of the window frame? Is it a light? Is it a part of the window itself? Look at this next glowing blob upstage. It doesn't even have detail. It's surrounded by some sort of fog. The next light has very little detail too. It's shaped more like a 1950s television screen for some reason. Some sort of structure is indicated beneath these, but that structure just ends right here at War of the Worlds. Let's take a look at the ceiling. It's got an interesting layered level effect happening that's appealing. There seems to be some sort of narrow column or support right here, or you might begin to think so, but it just vanishes into the fog light. Moving on across the ceiling, we get to these recessed lights up here. Most of them do look like recessed ceiling lights. I'm not sure why they're scattered around so randomly. I'm definitely not sure why this one is big and green either. Panning down to the left, we arrive at whatever this is. Is this a sculpture? It is certainly confusing. This might be a giant sculpted planaria worm. I dissected one of these for my science fair in about 6th grade. If I treated this as a set rendering, I would ask for more drawings, perhaps some supporting research to provide clarity. But let's look at this wall way back here in the back. At a glance, you might have thought it had drapes. No, instead, the wall itself is shaped like drapes, framing the window. The truth is, I kind of like this effect, except that this is an absolutely bizarre choice for the interior of a diner. The wall itself seems to be painted with some sort of pointillistic fauvism, like a Henry Rousseau painting. I must ask, what is the intention here? Should there be drapes? Why is the style of the wall so very different than the style towards the front? Somehow we've transitioned from Nighthawks to War of the Worlds to either Rene Magritte or Henry Rousseau, and we haven't even got a third of the way across this image yet. Let's have a look at this floor now. Wooden planks, okay. The light from the windows is hitting it. The light on the floor has very little or nothing to do with the windows shown in the image. We'll call that abbreviation though, let's let that go. Now let's move over to these stools. Why are they here? There's no counter to sit at. Why is this wall padded? It looks like the back of a diner booth, but it's got no seat. What is the intention? These stools each have only 2 or 3 legs. They don't all reach the floor. I'd write this off as abbreviation, except these are in the absolute foreground of the image. They're not background elements. A little clarity would be really helpful so we can inspect them visually. Now, speaking of other things in the foreground, let's look at this display case. In a diner, we all know what sorts of things we might like to see in a case like this. Inviting desserts, pieces of chocolate or lemon meringue pie. If this is a deli, we might see bins filled with chicken salad or sliced meat. This particular display case appears to be packed to maximum capacity with something brown and textured pressing right up to the glass. What do you think? Meatloaf, perhaps? It's got veins, whatever it is. Try not to think about it. Over here next to it, we have a little ornament of some kind with a leafy branch carved into it. I suppose that goes along somewhat with the Henry Rousseau painting on the back wall. Now, let's look above the counter if we can. I'm looking at this structural element right here. It appears to be another display case frame, except that this one goes on up and touches what can only be another hanging War of the Worlds ceiling light. Let's call that a mistake and just move on. The display case all the way at the back wall is divided into shelves and cubbies. Each is filled with the same sort of vague textures. Cranberries, walnuts, avocado pits, eyeballs. You decide. There are very similar display cases over here on the right. The AI made a very poor choice for the cases. It did not choose anything at all to put inside them. It simply filled them with a generic red-brown texture. Now there's a lesson here, and that lesson is that it's really easy for things to get super weird and super creepy if you do not make choices. Finally, let's pan up and look at this area up here. First, we see more odd, abstract mosaic wall paintings. Then we go left to where two bundles appear to be hanging from the ceiling. I think the one on the left might be a sleeping bag, or maybe it's a rolled-up tent. I'm not sure why it might be stored there. The one on the right, as far as I can tell, is either a large wad of pasta, or it's possibly the brain from planet Eros. So in review, what AI has done here is, across the board, the exact opposite of what a good designer will do. Not one item in this rendering has been placed here with any understanding of what it is, why it is there, or what it contributes. Not one area in this restaurant has any intention for any moment for actors to do any kind of existing. The display counters have no purpose, they have no contents, they display nothing. Our human eyes, we search images and spaces for understanding. We identify the shape, the volume, the assembly of objects. We trace their outlines with our eyes. In this image, outlines and form and style are abandoned in the name of filling the canvas. And that's what AI is really good at. Creating lots of content, just so long as you don't care what the content is.